a lot of people think, we always have to notify people. It's unethical if you don't notify people that they're interacting with an AI. That strikes me as fairly silly. If my photo software uses AI to recognize pictures of
Yes.
my kids,
Hmm.
I don't think I've been treated unethically because the software didn't tell me, hey, by the way, when we're recognizing pictures of your kids, we're using a certain kind of technology. We're using AI or machine learning or deep neural networks or whatever. I don't care. Who cares? I haven't been wronged by Apple not telling me that fact. So
Yes.
the question is, all right, when is it important for us to indicate that
Hmm.
someone is interacting with an AI?
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Engatica's interview series. I'm your host Nimilika and we're really glad to have you join us today. Today we have Reid Blackman, AI ethics advisor and author of the most amazing book Ethical Machines on the show. Welcome to the show, Reid.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I am very excited to talk to you. The Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world. A platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come be a part of our community, learn, share, and grow with us. Reed, can we start off by you telling us about your practical guide, Building Ethical AI?
Yeah, sure. So you're referring in particular to the article, A Practical Guide to AI Ethics? Is that what you're referring to, or just generally?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I talk about various ways or things that senior leaders can put AI ethical risk mitigation practices into place. So the vast majority of the work I do involves advising senior leaders on how to put AI ethical risk programs into place. Or if you don't like the phrase ethical risk programs, you could talk about AI governance. That's,
Hmm.
more or less amounts to the same thing. So that's what I'm doing. And then, there are things like write an ethics statement, because that will begin to articulate what your standards are. One thing I don't mention in that article, but I say a lot now because it's so important, is organizations need to do a gap and a feasibility analysis. So once they've articulated what their standards are, then you got to do a deep dive into understanding how far away your organization is from meeting those standards. And then it's really crucial to make sure that you're involving lots of people from different departments. So maybe not lots
Hmm.
of people, but at least the heads of different departments. So you want someone from risk, you want someone from compliance, you want someone from cyber, you want someone from HR, so on and so forth. Because ultimately, if you're going to build that program, it's going to have to go enterprise wide. And in order to go
Hmm.
enterprise wide, you're going to have the leaders of various units of the business involved from the start to make sure that they're bought in and that you get their insights into what's going to scale well, how do we make sure that the program plays nicely across the enterprise, as opposed to sort of, meeting roadblocks.
Right, that's so true. And you've mentioned that people from at least the heads of the different departments have to take part in the decision making. So you're saying all of these heads have to have the basic knowledge of how AI works, right?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Yes, one of the first things that I try to do whenever I work with a client, or when myself and my team work with a client, is
Hmm.
get them to understand what AI ethical risk is about, because they don't.
Hmm.
They're not, that's not their fault. It's not, AI or machine learning wasn't within their remit when they were becoming a risk officer or a compliance officer or a cyber strategist or whatever it is. So making sure that, first of all, everyone is on the same page.
Hmm.
And from there, yeah, you need to make sure that the program that you're creating harmonizes with existing infrastructure, policies, procedures, et cetera. So to give you an example, you might have someone from risk who cares a lot about enterprise risk categories. And then the question will become, okay, are we going to have the risk categories within our AI ethical risk program mirror and harmonize with existing enterprise risk categories? Or are we going to have some separate ones? And is that sort of distinction, there's that lack of harmony, okay? Can we
Hmm.
sufficiently translate from the kind of risk analyses and the categories that, say, data scientists use? Can we translate that properly to our enterprise risk categories so that the risk team can be involved in the conversation, the policy, the procedures, et cetera?
Yes, yes, got it. So how can we build transparency into big AI projects?
So when I think about transparency, the first thing that I'll highlight is that I want to distinguish it from explainability. So
Mm-hmm.
transparency has to do with clearly communicating to relevant stakeholders about all the decisions you're making around a given AI, an AI lifecycle, and clear communication around what your governance structure looks like, what kinds of decisions
Yes.
you make and why. That's distinct from explainability, which has to do with what's going on between the inputs and the outputs of an AI model. How do we avoid a black box if we ought to avoid a black box in a particular use case? So look, it's going to be about policy, procedures, controls, making sure that there are things in place that make it the case that various roles have responsibilities to communicate certain kinds of information to certain other internal and external stakeholders.
Right, right. Now, because so many products out in the market are using AI, everyday products, and we as consumers use so much of AI without knowing that there is AI
Sure.
that is, influencing our lives. So, what
Yeah.
are some conversations that these companies have to have about ethics in AI while building these products?
Well, there's lots. I mean, so if we're talking in the realm of transparency, then there's lots to say about, everyone puts on their ethics statement, we're for transparency. And, it's completely thin. It means nothing because you're not going to be transparent with everyone about everything. And you're not going to be transparent with no one about anything. So it's somewhere in the middle. Where does that lie? Well, now you have to do some actual work to figure out, okay, where do we lie? Where, what are our standards for communication with internal and external stakeholders? So getting clear on that is going to be a really important first step. And I should say, a lot of people think, we always have to notify people. It's unethical if you don't notify people that they're interacting with an AI. That strikes me as fairly silly. If my photo software uses AI to recognize pictures of
Yes.
my kids,
Hmm.
I don't think I've been treated unethically because the software didn't tell me, hey, by the way, when we're recognizing pictures of your kids, we're using a certain kind of technology. We're using AI or machine learning or deep neural networks or whatever. I don't care. Who cares? I haven't been wronged by Apple not telling me that fact. So
Yes.
the question is, all right, when is it important for us to indicate that
Hmm.
someone is interacting with an AI? And there are certain
Hmm.
sort of, higher risk chatbot scenarios, right? So let's say you're using a chatbot with your bank, or maybe with a
Hmm.
healthcare system, with your hospital, with your doctor or your doctor's office. Then those are cases in which it's higher stakes and might be important to indicate, hey, you're using an AI here.
Correct.
Yeah, so building out what those standards are when we think it's important that information is communicated. Building out those standards earlier on or in a proactive way makes things move a lot faster down the line for particular use cases.
So you're saying ethical AI is basically, dependent on the context. So in an aeroplane situation, the ethics are different, and in an app situation where we have photos and the AI is doing some kind of clustering on photos, it's all contextual.
Well, look, there's that's somewhat fair to say. I think that's fine. Ethical judgments depend upon a variety, good, sound ethical judgment depends upon a variety of input factors or features of the
Hmm.
situation. Those
Hmm.
can change. So being able to incorporate that kind of sensitivity to the varying features of a context and how it weighs on the ethical relevance of what you're doing, that's really important. So that's context dependent. What's not context dependent is creating a governance structure that is systematically sensitive to those contexts.
Okay. Yes,
So when you
yes.
say AI ethics is context dependent, well, it depends what you mean by AI ethics. If you mean AI governance or an AI ethical risk program is sensitive to, is context dependent. No, that's not quite right. Those are, while there's variation, they're relatively stable or ought to be relatively stable across context because it's supposed to be sufficiently flexible such that it allows you to make those ethical judgments in particular contexts. If when you say AI ethics depends on context, you mean the right or wrong or ethically permissible or impermissible thing to do in a situation is context dependent, yes, then the answer is yes. And that's not just true of AI ethics in particular, but of just ethical judgment in general.
Right, right. That was so beautifully explained. So can you tell us more about your book, Ethical Machines?
No. Yes, I
No?
can. So the book is, the audience is officially senior executives, board, C-suite, head of AI or SVP of AI or whatever it is. But it's written in a way that anyone could understand it.
Hmm.
So it's also in some broad sense for the junior data scientist, the product owner. I think it's a great book for students as well if they want to familiarize themselves with the space.
Yes.
I gave the book to a colleague of mine who heads up responsible AI at a Fortune 500. And she said, this is
Okay.
great. I can give this book to my grandmother and she can actually understand what I do. So
Beautiful.
part of the goal of the book is to speak in a language that is as accessible as I can make it, given the subject matter.
Hmm.
Then what I want to do, what I try to do is really show people the landscape of AI ethics, because there's dozens of buzzwords that people fling back and forth at each other as though that were to constitute a serious discussion. So we just say the words like explainability and transparency and bias and fairness and justice and privacy, and then we say, right, and we need to take care of these things. And that's just so superficial. It doesn't mean anything. And so and then there's AI for good, and we want to have positive social impact. And so I want to pull all that stuff apart. I want to show people, I want to give some order, some structure to all these words and concepts so people understand the AI ethical risk landscape better, or the AI ethics landscape better, understanding that AI ethical risk mitigation is part of the picture. It's the part that I specialize in. It's the part that I think businesses ought to focus on, but it's part of the whole landscape, not the whole thing. So getting people to understand that landscape is a really important thing for me. At least that's what I'm trying to do in the book. And then to go deeper on the issues. So again, we could just mouth the word bias, but what does that actually amount to? So getting really clear on what do we mean when we're talking about biased or discriminatory AI? What are the many sources? What are the kinds of things that we can do to engage in bias mitigation, both from a strategic and a tactical level? So that's really important to me. And then finally, it's okay, now you're going to build out this program. Here's what your program should look like.
Yes. So I think this book will be the perfect Christmas gift for anybody, any age, any demographic.
Thanks.
So,
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So our audience is going to go and buy it on Amazon. And thank you so much for writing this book and giving the world what it needs right now, because this is an era where we are using AI on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Not only in a B2B situation, but as consumers, we are consuming a lot of AI products. So thank you so much for writing this book.
Yeah, it was
And
my
before we
pleasure.
end
Thanks for
our,
reading it.
thank you so much. So before we end our conversation, do you have any sound bites to share with our audience?
Any sound bites to share? I don't know. How long is a sound bite? What do you want? 30 seconds? 10 seconds?
However long you want to go.
I don't know if I have a sound bite. I guess my sound bite is, don't base your understanding on AI ethics on sound bites. Go deeper into the issue.
Read the book.
Read the book. That'd be lovely.
Yes. So thank you so much, Reid, for sharing your insights with us. Thank you a lot for joining us in this interview.
That was my pleasure.
Thank you. For more content, subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders from around the globe. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you with a new expert soon.